Welcome everybody, my name is Anthony James, founder and CEO of LinuxAcademy.com and CloudAssessments.com. And today we're joined by Samuel Younge. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes, you did.
Perfect. You know, sometimes my grammatical skills aren't the best, but we're joined by Samuel Younge, who has all 5 AWS certifications. And what we're going to do here is we're just going to talk to him about his experience when it comes to certification. He's going to provide advice to potential students, talk a little bit about his career, why he decided to get certified, and really just give us a few tips and tricks. So real quick, Samuel, if you don't mind, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself to get started?
Hi, my name is Samuel Younge, and I currently am the owner of Cepheus Rod, LLC, and it's an information services company trying to get off the ground. We're doing some interesting things with information services. Primary site is faithmail.org, which is doing pretty well right now. A lot of the other things I'm doing haven't really taken off, but working on it. I've had a long career working in IT. I started out as a LAN/WAN administrator for the Federal Aviation Administration way back in 1994-5, and worked for them for quite some time. And eventually, that's where I got introduced into certifications and started getting certified in various things, and moved from there into IT consulting for a little bit. I worked with some of the big consulting firms, did a lot of traveling throughout the U.S., mostly a little bit in Canada, and worked with a lot of different corporations, helping them set up their infrastructure and helping to manage their teams as far as getting them back on track to their objectives. Did that for many years, and after that, I sort of moved more into programming. I started with Java programming. I got my Java certification from Sun Microsystems at some point.
Very nice.
And that sort of led off to a career in Java programming, which I did for quite some time. And from there, I kind of moved into .NET programming. And that's kind of where the journey has taken me. Now on the horizon, I'm kind of becoming interested in AI. So I'm sort of researching that in my personal time, but I'm not sure if I'm actually going to pursue a degree in that. Maybe a master's in some form of AI, advanced AI degree or certification or certificate. I know Stanford has a nice certificate they offer. I was looking at that, but not really sure yet, but I'm thinking about pursuing that as well. That's where I'm from and where I've been and where I'm headed.
Well, that's great, Samuel. And I think part of maybe the key there, considering the fact that you're going and you're actually potentially looking towards a master's degree, you got all 5 AWS certifications, is it sounds like you believe in this, this kind of methodology of always be learning or continuous learning, as they kind of put it sometimes in the DevOps world. And so, that's really cool. Do you have, what challenges do you have, or do you feel like that you've had when it comes to always be learning, really?
Yeah, really, it's a motivational challenge for me for the most part. One thing about IT in general, and I guess anything that has to do with technology, no matter the field, is it's continually changing. And it's not enough to where you can learn or master something and then expect to remain a master at it for the rest of your life. IT is really in a constant state of change, and you really have to be active about your pursuit for knowledge and be aggressive about staying on top of the field. That's one reason certifications are so important, because even though academic education is certainly fundamental and important, certifications are a continual revalidation of your technical competence and skill.
Absolutely.
And that's something that employers are really looking for. I mean, they want to know that you have the interpersonal skills and the fundamental business skills and communication skills to function in an organization, which a higher level academic degree can give you. But they also want to know that you are competent in your position and able to perform at a high level technically. And to do that, you really need to spend a lot of time studying various technologies and certifications.
So I know that a lot of our students kind of take the same path, that self-employment path. And so, perhaps we can circle back around with that and maybe talk a little bit about, why you decided to get AWS certified and how that has helped you with your business moving forward.
Right. Well, I've always had sort of an entrepreneurial spirit, and I've had many businesses over the years. Most of them were not successful, unfortunately. So it's been sort of a trial and error type thing as I've progressed. And each time I've attempted a new business, I've applied what I've learned from my past mistakes. And while I was working on the AWS certification track at Linux Academy, for the most part, I was also attempting to start up another small business. This time, primarily information services focus. And so I was doing that kind of as a part-time thing. Wasn't really committed to it 100%. I was primarily going through the AWS track to become a DevOps engineer. That was my career goal. So my intention when starting down the AWS track was to take a position with a large company, probably a consulting firm, working as either a DevOps manager or a DevOps engineer. And that was really my career goal. But, things happen, things change. And by the time I finished the certification track, and which I completed very rapidly thanks to your site, Linux Academy really helped me complete that in a timely manner. And I'm very grateful for the resources you have available.
Well, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it was very helpful. It would have took me much longer without those resources.
How long, not to derail on that, but since you mentioned it, how long did you take to go from 0 AWS certifications to 5 AWS certifications?
I didn't really keep exact track of the time. I think I went through each certification in about 3 months apiece.
Time flies when you're having fun. So yeah. That's what I'm going to say.
Yeah, the associate level certifications I went through pretty quickly. The professional certifications I spent a little more time preparing for, and they were a bit more challenging. But eventually, all in all, I could say I spent about 3 months for each exam.
Okay, that seems about right. That way you take the time to learn the concepts, how to actually do it. And I know probably from your perspective, since you were doing it from kind of the, your startup standpoint, I know originally you were looking towards potentially getting a job, and that kind of shifted into managed services. So you're probably primarily interested in actually knowing how to do it, not just pass the exams. Exactly.
Well, you're not going to pass the exams if you don't know how to do it. I can tell you that right now.
They're designed pretty tough that way.
Yeah, they're tough. I mean, not only do you have to have sort of an understanding of the way the exams work and all that, but you really have to know your stuff as far as the AWS interface and the AWS feature set. You really don't stand a chance of passing unless you're very confident using the technologies. And that was one of the great things that came out of it, because as I was saying, I started up this business as a part-time thing, and these AWS skills really came in handy. I never, I didn't really predict that I wouldn't be applying these skills to use for some company I work for, that I'd be using them for myself. So it's very fortunate that I did go down the AWS track, because I'm using a lot of AWS services to accomplish the things I'm accomplishing. And it's really going well. I mean, when I had my resume out there after completing the final certification, I really got a strong response. Recruiters were contacting me hourly. It was really a overwhelming type thing, and I was very happy. And I was weighing my options, deciding what to do. And in the middle of all this, my faithmail.org site user count just went off the scales. I mean, just users started pouring in. I was adding maybe 10 to 100 users every day, and I say we're up to about over 2,000 users right now.
And what is that? What was that domain again? I'm going to check that out.
It's faithmail.org.
Faithmail?
Yeah, it's a email service for the community of faith.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, so it's a nice thing. It's kind of I did for a personal project, and it's spun into a business. So it's going along really well, and I hope it continues to grow. And So I've put my career on hold just to see if this really works out and is successful. And if it is, I'm going to continue down this path and expand more into more information services areas, primarily into the medical information services areas is really where I'm headed. I have a medical site as well for doctors, for MDs and DOs.
No kidding.
Yeah, I do. It's acphiusrod.com.
Okay.
It really hasn't taken off. It's been slow to build users, and I think that's one of the primary reasons for that is the business model isn't perfect yet. I kind of have it restricted now to where only doctors and MDs can join. So the approval process is kind of rigorous to get access.
Yeah.
I think that's kept back a lot of users from using the site. So I really have to rework the business model to get it more accessible to more people. That's something I plan to focus on in the future.
So, I know we're talking about kind of success and, words of encouragement around preparing for certifications, but what I actually want to do is I want to cycle around a little bit more and just really kind of commend you on your startup, your managed services and what you're doing. And we've all been there. I have failed. And I think one of the things that you hit on here, and it relates to, training and learning new things as well, is failing isn't a bad thing, right? All failing does is tell you what you don't know or what doesn't work. So it's also part of the continuously learning process. So, when it comes to building companies, it sounds like that you're just learning at what doesn't work and how to try something differently. And so,
right.
When that's applied to training, or, you go and take a certification, if you fail, as much as it stinks to fail, sometimes it happens. We've all failed exams. I mean, at least I have. It just tells you where you're weak, and it's an opportunity for growth. So I just want to commend you on that. That's really awesome that you have continued to go through and do that. The more times you fail, it's going to it gets you there, right? So that's a great job, and I just wanted to say thank you for sharing that. It really means a lot.
Yeah, well, thanks. Yeah, it's definitely a learning process. It's all about learning, continual learning, and not only learning, but it's also about being able to validate your knowledge level to other people, particularly employers and other peers. So you want to be able to present yourself in the best light and to take on challenging and exciting roles with various companies and organizations. And to do that, you really have to have credentials. And in order to get those credentials, certification is really fundamental.
It's kind of the best way to show some of the newest technologies out there.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
With that, what was your biggest challenge or biggest risk when it came to preparing for those AWS certifications?
Let's see, the biggest challenge. Well, I think I kind of touched on it earlier, but it was really morale and motivation, because preparing for these exams is so challenging mentally, and it's really draining. You really, at least for myself, I become faced with a morale type issue. Like I start to question, should I really be doing this? Mm-hmm. Am I going to pass? And each exam that you don't pass, it's more expense because you have to pay for the exams even if you don't pass them. So you're like, well, can I really afford to take all 5 exams? And
when you're kind of a startup and you're starting your own company, every dollar counts. So I can imagine that was kind of some pressure on you.
It's a financial concern, and it's also a morale concern. It's kind of discouraging when things don't work out. But if you keep applying yourself and keep focusing and follow your instructor's advice and listen and are attentive and read all the required reading and go through the lectures and videos and all that, and have good resources like Linux Academy, I mean, it really puts you in the right track to be successful. And really, resources are very, very important to being successful and applying yourself.
So I guess that brings me to my next question. Why did you choose Linux Academy over other providers for certification training?
Well, I looked at a few of them, and I like Linux Academy because your rates are very reasonable and you have a tremendous amount of content, and you also have the hands-on labs, which are very useful. A lot of your competitors don't offer that. And your rates are really reasonable. And also, but the primary reason I like Linux Academy over your competitors is that you focus on certifications. You don't really focus on various knowledge domains as much as you focus on certifications, and you tailor your instruction and learning to passing certain certifications and becoming competent in certain skill sets that are necessary for certifications. And that was exactly what I was looking for. I mean, it's important to learn a lot about technology, but really to be successful in an exam, you really have to narrow your focus as much as possible into the task that's before you. And I think Linux Academy does a better job of that than I've seen done anywhere else, as far as tailoring the instruction to a specific learning path, laying that learning path out incrementally and step by step, and taking you down that path, which ultimately leads to your success.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. You know, one of the things that our philosophy is not necessarily train to pass an exam, but to train you at the level to which the exam expects, right? So if you know how to do the things at the level that the exam is testing for, then passing an exam is easy. And that's where the hands-on labs come in, because you're not just kind of studying practice, you know, question and answer practices. You're trying to understand fully what's going on. And hopefully you can take that and apply that in your, you know, for example, your business. So yeah, that's really, I really appreciate you saying that. And so, you know, you've taken an untraditional path in the IT career. And you've essentially retired and you came back to go into managed services. And that's just a really great story. What kind of advice would you give to really maybe somebody in the profession already that's looking to start their own company, or maybe a student who is looking to get in the IT field? What kind of advice would you give them?
Right. Yeah, you're right. I did go about things sort of backwards. I mean, I really started my IT career without much knowledge. I was always an enthusiast about computers and technology, and I would read all the trade magazines and go to trade shows and tinker with my own stuff. And I really just stumbled across the right person who was actually having a Unix problem with something, and that he couldn't resolve, and I just happened to know how to resolve that problem, and I gave him some advice to how to fix it. And I was actually working in the mailroom at that time, and then he was a contractor for the FAA, one of the contracting officers. So he was in charge of a big portion of the department, of that wing of the IT and the assets department. And he tried my solution to his problem, and it fixed the problem.
No kidding.
And he came back the next day and said, "What are you doing in the mailroom?" And I said, "I don't know. You tell me." He brought me on as his assistant, and from then on, I kind of paved my own way in the IT field, and from there, I moved in and got my MCSC certification, Microsoft Certified Systems Engineer certification.
Oh, that's great.
And from there, that just validated my suspicions that the certifications were the path for me, and I went down that path and charged ahead and just kept acquiring certifications. I got a Citrix certification. And
how many have you acquired over the years?
I lose track. I'd say between 12 and 15.
That's great.
I don't really keep track anymore. And, one of the frustrating things is it's hard to keep them current. So some of them have expired. And once you have, 12 of them, keeping them current is next to impossible, because you can't recertify all those. It's not practical.
You definitely can't move forward with new certifications if you are trying to recertify all those.
Yeah, it's tough. So you really have to focus. But from there, I kind of moved into consulting, and after I had a long, successful career in IT, and then I retired, and I actually moved to Hawaii and retired and was living the life. Had a pretty good life out there, but I became so bored. I really had nothing to do. And that just wasn't me. I was always an aggressive learner my whole life, and just going from a position to where you're actively reading technical documentation on a daily basis and doing interesting things for companies, to a point to where you're just sitting around looking at the ocean all day. It sounds like the dream come true, but it really wasn't for me. I was really unhappy when I retired, and so I said, okay, let me go back to school and do things the right way, the way that that it was always recommended that I do in the first place. And I got my AA in liberal arts first, and then I moved on to a BS in computer information systems. And so, for people who are just starting out, people who are students, looking to get into IT, I would definitely recommend following the advice of your elders, doing things the proper way, completing high school, maintaining good grades, get a good SAT score so you can get into a good college, get into a good 4-year university. And if you can't qualify for a 4-year, go to a 2-year university, get your 2-year, 4-year degree, and then move on to some form of graduate degree if you can. And then, once you do all that, really start hitting the technical certifications.
Sure.
The Linux certifications are very, very popular right now. I'd definitely go down the Linux path, become very competent in Linux as much as you can, particularly Red Hat and the Debian distributions. Become very competent down those two paths. And then also AWS is on fire right now. Cloud technologies is really where it's at right now. Definitely AWS is the leader, but also Microsoft with Azure is very popular, and they're probably going to get stronger with the direction that their CEO Nadal has taken them. They're getting them back on track as far as rejoining the open source community. Mm-hmm. So, you can look for them to advance. But I think really right now, AWS and Azure are the places that you want to be technically certified going forward. In a couple years, maybe 5 to 10 years, it's probably going to shift more, to Internet of Things, technologies as chip architecture continues to reduce in size and things become more distributed and more open systems based. I think we're going to see a lot of small indie companies producing ITO chips and chipsets to do all sorts of remarkable things.
Absolutely.
And being able to program and implement those chipsets are going to be in hot demand in the future, as well as AI is going to be revolutionary for the world, particularly when you combine AI with robotics. So that's where the future is. I mean, now it's definitely Linux, AWS, Azure. That's the here and now, and it's definitely here. If you want a good, high-paying job and be able to set your own terms with your employee and profession, that's where you want to be right now. But in the future, you're going to look towards Internet of Things. You're going to want to look towards AI and robotics.
Samuel, that's great advice. And one of the takeaways I just kind of want to sum up from there as well is it sounds like kind of your key to everything is continuous learning. Failure is not a bad thing, and don't retire, but take vacations instead. And Hawaii. Yeah. Sounds great. So Samuel, I appreciate it. This has been fantastic. Thanks for taking the time, and I look forward to hearing about some of your future successes.